Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with Nate Payo, the show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello, welcome again to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, I'm your host, Nate Payo. Today, I'm joined with high performance coach Mike Szczesniak. Mike, how are you today?
Nate, I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
Doing great. So let's talk a little bit about how I've met my guests. And it tends to be, most of the people seem to be coming from the same place, which is Unconventional Leaders Facebook group with Heather Paraday. And that's where I think I first connected with you, Mike. And people always like asking like, hey, can you get a lot out of social media and connecting with people? And I find that when you start kind of pushing yourself down a path of a journey, especially if you're getting out of your comfort zone, hanging out in places that the people you want to emulate, like podcasting, tends to put you in contact with other people that are doing the same things. And some people are just beginning their journey and other people are doing very successful with it. And I think Mike's one of those people that's doing things really successfully and setting a good business and a good example for everybody out there get started. So, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing really well, man. Thanks for those kind words. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you posted recently, and this is why you're on my show, is you said, hey, I'm going to go on this tour of getting on 50 podcasts in like a really short period of time. Like it's like within like 2 weeks, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, it was a crazy number.
So
we didn't quite hit it, but we're doing really well. I'm doing a bunch of interviews every single day.
What was the reasoning behind getting on 50 podcasts?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's like I firmly believe in the message and the work that we're doing, and I know how valuable it can be, and I just want to get it out to as many people as possible. You know, especially right now with what's going on in the world. I don't know how backed up you are when this will roll out, but as we're rolling it out, the majority of the U.S. is still under like quote unquote quarantine or lockdown or shelter in place or whatever other like negative word we want to throw around this situation. And I know some are rolling them out soon or like easing restrictions, but we're all like in this situation. I think this type of work is so important. And obviously, like selfishly, I really believe in the podcast that we're building, and I want as many people to hear this message as possible, so that we can hopefully grow that show, and it could be a good vehicle for that.
Yeah. So you're talking about your message. What can you explain a little bit more about what your message is?
Yeah. So for me, my whole company, I operate in the high performance coaching and consulting world. Which when I say high performance, I always like to define that really quickly because that was a branding nightmare for me when I was starting this company, because most of my network came from the fitness industry. I had been in the fitness world for a very long time, from when I wanted to get recruited for soccer in college all the way up until being a competitive powerlifter and tons of different twists and turns in between. So people heard high performance, saw fitness content as I was putting it on Instagram, training for my first powerlifting competition. And they're like, okay, cool. He's a fitness coach. Nope. High performance is simply succeeding beyond standard norms consistently over the long term while maintaining positive well-being and positive relationships, right? When we really dive into that, there's usually, if I'm working with a client in the certified high performance coaching realm, going through that curriculum, we're diving into 5 areas: clarity, energy, courage, productivity, and influence. Right? This is how we operate life. Mm-hmm. And with so many twists and turns being thrown around right now, we need to make sure that we're optimizing a lot of these things, right? And making sure that we're showing up powerfully, because whether it's for our team and our employees or for our clients or for our family members and our personal relationships, we all need to support one another right now. And what's going on in the world has simply raised the necessity that we need to get this message out a lot more.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like for me, I've noticed like when this first went down, everybody's new to what stay-at-home orders meant, and people were, they're from all walks of life. And some people have jobs and some people have businesses and some people already stay at home. and they're trying to figure out what their path is. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And some people maybe stayed home, didn't do anything. They're not planning for their next moves when this order's lifted. And other people are planning moves and they're trying to get better at this. But I think no matter where people are at mentally and what they're challenging themselves to do in this time, as we've progressing longer and longer through this, that monotony starts getting to us. That like, hey, even though like me personally, I've started like going, hey, this is a benefit to me because I have this extra time. I can really focus on getting good guests on my podcast. I can start promoting it more. I don't have like these other distractions. Like there's this positive to it, but at the same time, like I feel like this overwhelm of, hey, oh my God, like, it's not really going fast enough. Like, am I doing it hard enough? And every day feels like exactly the day before. So sometimes like, you have a message or you have a goal or you have a vision that you're kind of following along. But like, I don't feel it today. Like I'm not believing in it. So if I'm not believing in it, how can I move that needle forward just a little bit? And having a coach, helps you kind of like relook at yourself and have somebody kind of like, hey, look, I'm going to reach inside you and help you pull this out. Like, how are you helping people that are going through similar things?
Yeah. I think that's just life. And, right now, this whole situation is kind of like the magnifying glass, almost a little bit. Like everything tends to be blown a lot more, not out of proportion in the sense of like, we're just throwing fits, but like it's amplified, right? And, there's tensions are running high. A lot of people are under the same, roof. And like, it's wild with what's going on. So at the end of the day, like how we're delivering and how we're supporting clients hasn't changed. It's making sure that they're supported in those 5 key areas and going through that curriculum and kind of putting that spotlight. But like you mentioned, it's a lot of introspective work. And sometimes having that person to really like go to and support and like help navigate those conversations can change the game. And for me, just out of like empathy for what's going on, it's been a lot closer touch points with people, like checking in. That's like in terms of like business building. I mean, I'm just operating as normal. A lot of my day is really focused on checking in with people, not just clients, but people in my world and just making sure people feel supported right now. And, business will sort itself out. But I think right now we have to support one another for sure.
Yeah, I think there's also some benefit when you reach out to somebody to support them and you check in on them. It makes them, lift it up a little bit. Like, hey, somebody that cares about me, they're checking in. But I think when you also reach out to somebody, it helps give you a little bit of strength too, because you're like, hey, I'm going to reach out to the people that are in my circle of influence or people like I was used to doing business with or old friends and stuff like this. And you reach out and you're like, hey, if I'm gonna offer them support, I got to be strong too. So if they need something, they rely on me. Like I'm not gonna crumble under their pressure too, So it's important to kind of be strong for everybody, and then that enthusiasm or that spirit, I think, is a little bit contagious, and it helps people kind of say, hey, look, if they're doing it, I can do it as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, we always hear the cliche of all these like big name entrepreneurs that are giving back in crazy ways. And they talk about how they selfishly do it, right? Because it makes them feel better and they feel like they get more than they've actually given. Yeah. And I think this is just another example of that, like a different flavor of it, right? Like we want to show up, we want to support people, and we want to navigate, like start those conversations and just connect. And while another person's going to feel extremely loved and be like super grateful for you reaching out, you feel great as well. Cause you're like, even whatever's going on in this world right now, whatever's happening in the business or whatever's happening in my career, like I could still show up and support other people. Like it's a really gratifying feeling.
Yeah, that reminds me. I always watch this Denzel Washington quote, the speech he gives on YouTube, or maybe as a compilation, but I think it's from like a graduation ceremony. He talks about that doing something nice for somebody else is one of the most selfish things you can do because it feels so good. And it really does. Like for me, when I started, like really trying to find fulfillment in my career goals or whatever I was doing. Whenever I got to something I accomplished, it was always kind of like, what's next? What's next? And I didn't have this like sense of fulfillment, but I started feeling like where I was the most fulfilled was when I started connecting other people to people in their lives that could make a difference. And I was like, hey, it's not so much about helping myself so much as helping others. That's where the real value, the real fulfillment is. And so if you kind of change your mindset a little bit, like what can I do for myself, but what can I do for others? And you're constantly going, that person needs some help with something. Who do I know in my network that I could connect them to and make both of those people feel like they're thought of and cared for? They're making a connection. They're doing good. So they're like, hey, that guy did a really nice thing for me and connected me to somebody else. Somebody goes, hey, that person threw me some business, and win-win for everybody. It's like, hey, and I feel great doing it. So I think that's an important message to do. And it takes a while to figure that out, especially for people, I think, starting off in their careers, at least for me, because when you get going in something, a lot of it is like your performance is judged on like what you can individually accomplish. Like, hey, I got to produce some worksheets. I got to produce some product, and I can take this data and I can enter into a computer and I can spit it out and I can get X done in a day. And it's like, okay. And you start doing good. Then somebody says, okay, well, now your career isn't so much what you can produce. It's what people that work for you can produce if you become a manager or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, well, it's a little different when your outcomes are judged on what you can build as a team to produce. Those outcomes aren't easily identifiable in a day-to-day basis. Sometimes they take like fruition, and then you start realizing like, hey, it's not so much about me, but it's about the people I can bring together and assimilate into this team of resources to accomplish the goals. And the more bigger network I have, the more tools I have at my disposal, and I'm able to solve more problems. And I think when you start realizing that that's a good skill to have, it really comes down to how can you connect other people within your network and help them achieve their successes and solve problems. Your network tends to grow, and it grows exponentially, and you have a lot more sway and pull. So it does always kind of like come back to you in this self-centered fashion, even though you're probably not trying to do it self-centeredly.
Yeah. I can't remember who it was that said it. It might have been like Brad Lee at some point. But he talked about like, there's the cliche, we all have 24 hours in the day, and he just doesn't believe that. And here's why. He goes, no, like I have 24 hours, but Nate, you also have 24 hours. So if I get you working on my problem, now we got 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Right. And that kind of speaks to this. Like, if we want to accomplish something faster, we grow the team so that all of a sudden, maybe we have 24 hours, but we only have to work 8 because you're going to work 8 and we got someone else, named Sally who's going to also work 8. Or then we could add a bunch of other people and all of a sudden we're really growing that time. But here's the thing. They're not going to stick around unless they feel like they're loved on and that you have an interest in their growth.
Yeah, I think the cause that you're working for has to be important, especially if you're a part of a team, because you want to feel like it's bigger than you, it's bigger than the group you're working on. Like, hey, this is something that's important for my values and beliefs. We want to take it far. I've been reading Simon Sinek's book, Infinite Game. I don't know if you've read that, but he talks a lot about that mindset of visionary companies or visionary leaders. And it's not in this like win at all cost mentality, and it's doing something that's bigger than yourself. So that's a pretty cool book if you're interested in checking it out. But so Mike, what kind of, how did you know you wanted to become a high performance coach? Like, did you feel a calling, and like, how did you, we talked a little bit before we got on the show that you were in corporate engineering prior to doing this. And that's kind of a big leap of faith, and something that's always struck me, because I've been in corporate all my career, and I've had a desire to do more, but I always feel like getting that leap out is a challenge, because there's so many people in your industry that know you as Mike the engineer, and then you go, well, I'm gonna define myself as something else that's not what everybody knows me at. And they're like, And I think internally we have this fear, like, how can I be that person that I'm not defined by my peers as? And, it's a big challenge to step out and be uncomfortable with getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in that situation. So what's your story behind that?
Yeah. So first of all, it was the opposite. I didn't feel like a calling. I actually felt like a repulsion to coaching. I avoided it for probably like 3 years while people that were very, very close to me were like pushing me into the space. And for context, I've always been someone that like wanted to create, right? Like even anyone watching the video, like I used to make duct tape wallets in middle school, right? Like this is vinyl camo duct tape with like Velcro latches, dominated the market. What did I need money for in 5th grade though? Like if I wanted to go to the movies, my parents would have given me $10, dropped me off at the movies and be like, cool, we'll pick you up in 3 hours. So it didn't really make sense. And then I went and I moved, actually a guy that I brought on as a partner to scale that, right? I brought on 2 buddies. One of them got myself and the other guy a job working retail. We started the same day at a ski shop. I worked there for 10 years through the beginning of my software career because the beginning was unpaid training. So I would go Monday to Friday, commute 2.5 hours each way down to Wall Street from Westchester County where I live. And for unpaid training, and then Saturday and Sunday, I would work retail to make some money. And, even while I was in corporate, I started 3 businesses. And I say all that to illustrate, like I've always just been trying to create, even though I was the young kid making a really good salary and with an engineering degree, like senior engineer by the age of like 25, all these like vanity metrics that we want. I always wanted more. And I think it was because I believed that whatever it is that I wanted in life, I knew the likelihood that it would be provided by a salary was very, very low. Right? Possible, yes, but very, very low likelihood. And outside of commission sales or some sort of ownership, owning your own company, engineering is as close as you're going to get to like FU money, I guess. Like other than that, you got to own something. And I kind of knew that. And I just didn't buy into the whole like guaranteed safe route, which I think what's happening in the world is really indicating that it's not guaranteed. And that's just a fallacy that's been sold. Is it more stable? Yes. And I'm not here to bash 9 to 5 by any stretch. Like I was able to fund the beginning of my journey because of it. So it played a massive role for me. But on that journey, I started 3 different companies, and first 2 tanked. Third one was the coaching and consulting company because I finally got out of my own freaking way. I had this very negative stigma around the industry. I'd been relentlessly pursuing my own personal and professional development for a very long time. People very much like throughout the other businesses, at least my brand was built around work ethic and personal development. So that was persistent. It was just the vehicle that I was monetizing that kind of changed here and there. So people really knew me as that. And like, even in the engineering space, like even my colleagues, they knew like I was doing countless other things. They knew that I wanted more. When I left, frankly, it was like, oh, finally, they just expected it. But it was a culmination of a lot of things, and it was a really long journey. Frankly, I didn't think that I would last 5 years in the company. I thought maybe it'd be like 3 and done. And I wanted to leave, not because I hated what I was doing there, like I did by the end, because it was just a very toxic culture, but I enjoyed the work and I loved the people I worked with, and they're the reason I stayed as long as I did. But I thought it was going to be like 3 and done. And I wanted to move on probably from within 6 months. Like the goal was always to leave. And it took a long time for me to build the business to where I was comfortable doing it. And before I even did that, I had to have a bunch of pieces fall into place where I finally gave myself permission to enter the space.
Yeah.
It was, it wasn't until like there was a trip down to Fiji, climbing a telephone pole in torrential downpours, that like eventually was the aha moment. But it took a lot to get there. And then I gave my notice 6 days after I got back from that trip.
Yeah, I think you hit on something of getting out of your own way. And I kind of touched on like, hey, when you're trying to identify with yourself as something your peers don't identify with is sometimes it's just the message we tell ourselves in the head that says like, hey, you're defined as something, and you can't go down this path, and people are going to judge you on what you do. And I found that when you start sharing some of these other aspects of yourself, some other goals that you have, some personal development stuff you want to do, is people tend to like encourage it a little bit, and they kind of see like, hey, you're where your value is and what you bring to the table. They're not going to judge you on like, hey, you're crazy to go out and start something. I think a lot of that happens in our head, and especially when you're doing it. Now, maybe if you had just quit your job straight up and went out with no business experience at all and just tried to start it up just day one, people have been like, now that's crazy. But when you use it as a side, I don't like using the term a side hustle, but just kind of like pursuing your passions and your dreams, whatever that could be. It could be a hobby that you could turn into a business, or it could just remain a hobby you want to be really good at. We talked a little bit about you were into powerlifting. I mean, that's a hobby that's very rarely going to pay any kind of bills, because you have to be like extreme top level to even do that. And it's still a pretty niche thing, but there's no reason why you can't pursue that hobby, and people are going to support you, what you're doing. So when you kind of build up what you're doing on the side until you're ready to go launch, I think that's a smart move, and people are going to support that when they see you're doing it successful. They're going to say, hey, look, I think you got this, man. I think you should give it a shot. So it's always about getting out of our own way and just kind of like, hey, trust in the matter. And when you look back on it, at least for me, I look back and say, hey, when have I ever had a struggle professionally, and have I always found a way to reinvent myself or start over? And I have. And so why would that be any different? I mean, nobody likes a setback and a failure, but I think you could take a leap of faith and know like, hey, even if it doesn't work out, maybe the idea will pivot, it will change, and you can always go back to doing what you're doing. And maybe that's a motivation to keep pushing forward. You go, shit, I don't want to go back to doing what I was doing. And like, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to put in that extra effort to do it. And I think a lot of it's just showing up and being consistent.
Yeah, exactly. I think the other thing that's really important to note here, Nate, is like, people are going to criticize you regardless. And if they're not doing it publicly, then you better damn well be sure that they're doing it privately. Mm-hmm. So there's, you mentioned like a keynote talk Denzel Washington gives. There's one that I think it's Jim Carrey.
Yeah, I think.
Where it's like, you could fail miserably at what you don't want to do and be miserable the entire time. So why not try and do what you want to do, and do it responsibly, by the way. Like again, I built this business for a year and a half before I left corporate. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to rip the business model apart and essentially start from scratch when I did leave. So I don't suggest doing that, because it was a lot of stress. But I had gone through a lot of those inevitable failures early on and learned a lot in those first year and a half. So I could maximize my time afterwards and build that parachute or build those wings faster, to speak to the metaphor.
And I think anybody that's been in your space that's done stuff and grown things big will tell you, like, those challenges and those struggles, they never go away. You just kind of master the problems that you overcome to begin with, but you're going to have new obstacles that come up in the future, and you just got to face those. It's never going to be if you love the process, you love that journey, it's always going to be an exciting time.
Yeah. There's a great book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And that's one thing that he talks about in there. Like, you're never going to be without problems. It's just about up-leveling your life until you've graduated into problems that you're happy with. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you're always going to have problems to solve. So why not just continue to grow and up-level into the ones that, are great? Like, would we rather the problem be, oh, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent this week? Or, wow, my calendar is so full that I don't know how I'm going to be in two places at once right now.
Yeah.
Right? Both problems. But I'd rather have this one, because I'm not trying to have the financial instability and lack of like security, right? Well, I guess you could argue, if I didn't want that, like, probably shouldn't have left corporate. But hey, teach their own. Like, there always are going to be problems. It's just about like, hey, well, which problems would we prefer? and let's figure out how to up level into getting those and earning those problems.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mike, we work with a lot of high performers, or I'm guessing people that want to be high performers. Who are your ideal clients? Who are the type of people you like to work with?
Yeah, so I work a lot with small business owners or sales professionals, people who their income is very tightly coupled with their production, right? So when we get hyper focused on what's driving the needle, that almost immediately impacts their income and their impact, obviously. That's typically where it falls. And honestly, a reason for that is when I first started, I was super passionate about serving the millennial demographic. And I just knew most people weren't like me, relentlessly investing in myself and my future. I kind of understood that was a little weird and a little like out of the norm. And for me, I've never really been the sales guy. I'm the results guy. I just know how to get you to do more of what you're really good at. I always say I'm not in the business of how my clients make their money. I'm in the business of helping them do more without burning out.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it was like, okay, well, if I can loosely associate a dollar sign to the promise, no income claims, but if I can loosely associate it, right? Because if you're in sales, okay, 100 dials leads to 30 appointments, leads to 4 closes, right? We do more of those dials. We can make an educated guesstimation that you're going to close 30% more.
Yeah.
So that's really why we started there, and it just worked really well. And so we've continued to serve in those two niches. But at the end of the day, it's all the same. It's like, okay, what's driving the needle? Whatever the result is that we're looking for, what's driving the needle? We get focused on that, and then we just improve productivity and performance around those areas. We're going to get better results.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't always know what's driving the needle. Like they think they know what's driving the needle, and it takes somebody to step back and go like you think this is driving the needle, but I'm going to tell you it's this niche. I'll give you an example. I had a marketing professor, and he was a CEO of a commercial real estate company. And he was talking about who their client was. And you would think the client would be people who bought commercial real estate. And what they realized is that the people that buy commercial real estate, they have a broker and they stick with the broker. They don't really give a shit who their broker works for. So they go, well, do you advertise to the people buying property, or do you advertise to the brokers? And so they figured out like, hey, if we can bring the best brokers into our outfit, we're going to bring all their clients with us. And so it's about, hey, I realized that I thought driving the needle was more commercial real estate sales, but no, it's having people bring in the brokers, get those guys in. They're the ones that are going to bring the business in. That's going to come. We just got to get the best ones. So I think that's right on the money. So if people wanted to reach out to you, Mike, they wanted to get plugged into your program, like what kind of services are available, and how would they get connected with you?
Yeah, right now we're serving 2 main things. One is the certified high performance coaching. That's through High Performance Institute, which I'm certified through. It's Brendan Burchard's company. So it's the same questions and conversations that, everyone in that company is having with their A-list celebrity clients. Brendan works with Oprah and Usher and all those things. Those are those 5 pillars we mentioned earlier. And then I have my own methodology, Fear Hacking Academy, where we're really working with a lot of sales pros and small business owners to drive results faster. It's the main thing we've been focusing on right now, because with what's happening in the world, it's like, cool, well, we got to move the needle in whatever that looks like. And that's where I'm working most intimately with people right now. And at the end of the day, it's always like, if you have questions, guys, slide in the DMs, get them answered. Whether I can help you through a program of mine or just one-off question, please do not hesitate to ask. Don't feel like you're just going to get immediately sold something. If it makes sense, we'll have those conversations, but I know that there's that fear or that barrier sometimes. I want to make that clear right now. We need to get questions answered. And if I can support in any way, please don't hesitate, and we'll have those conversations.
I think that's a great approach, because a lot of times for me, even you see hey, I want to ask somebody some questions about what they're doing. And what I don't want to do is get off the phone and realize I signed up for some, expensive course that I didn't really intend to do. I want to, not get the high the high pitch of how could you put your family's future on to a dollar value on that, you're like, I just had a quick question, but you reach out to somebody, you build that trust, and you say, hey, I'm liking what Mike's doing. I see the people he's working with. I see their successes. I like his message, and I'm curious what's going on. And then you build that trust. And then when you're like, hey, I'm ready to do this, I think you're going to have people that are more committed, which works out good for you, because I think the more committed they are to your message, the more success they're going to get out of it. And then, when they're doing good, you're doing good, and you're doing good, they're doing good. So it all works out great together. So, Mike, how many podcasts you've been on the last week and a half?
Man, it's Wednesday. This is the second or third today. I have a coaching call with my group after this, and then I got one more this afternoon. So we're doing about 3 to 4 on average a day. Man, it's every time I do one of these tours, it's interesting. It's a whole different energy expenditure.
Yeah.
Like I got my Whoop band on, like tracking everything. And it's crazy. I was talking to a client of mine, a buddy of mine earlier, like the cardiovascular strain is just as much during these interviews, probably because I get fired up and just start ranting, but like as it is with a 2-mile walk with my dog.
Really?
Which is crazy to me. I'm like, how was my strain that much today? Like it was at, for example, like a 5 after my run or a 7 after my run, and I finished at a 13 for the day. I'm like, how? But yeah, we're doing on average I'm doing about 3 a day usually, minimum. And yeah, it's been wild, but it's been fun.
It is fun. Like I try to squeeze in a lot of my podcasts, like either at lunchtime or like in the early morning or after work. And like it's that there's like a buildup of like, oh, I got to go do this thing. And some days you don't feel like doing it. Be like, I don't really want to do it. Maybe I should cancel. And then like it kind of builds up, and then like you dial in, you're waiting for the person to show up, and well, maybe they're not going to show up. Maybe they'll cancel, and then they get on, and then like you go through this like hour conversation, you leave, you're just like, wow, that was so much energy. Like, I'm so glad I had that conversation. Like, it feels good. Like, get me some more of that. And you just leave like, at least for me, I leave all pumped up and ready to conquer the world. So sometimes it's that mental beat myself up ahead of time, but I know at the end, I'm just like, I'm ready to conquer the world. And, it helps me kind of keep motivated to do the things that I don't always want to do, and watching others achieve success as they chase their dreams kind of goes, hey, I can do this too. And it's one foot in front of the other. Be patient. Just keep plugging away at it, and it's bound to happen. And I like your story of showing people that you got to start somewhere. You don't have to have $1 billion budget and a big 100,000 million followers to get going. It's just kind of, hey, do it on the side until you can do it on your own. I know it's not always the most glamorous message that people want to hear, but there's a reason why people like Gary Vee repeat it, and other people say it too. It's like, hey, we all got to start somewhere. Like, just do it if you want to chase 100%. Big things.
100%. I mean, I understand why we all want the vanity metrics, and we think that we need thousands of followers and this and that. But I'll tell you what, I have more friends with less than like 20,000 followers on Instagram that are doing 6 figures a month right now. Because they have a niche audience that they over deliver to, and they're freaking badass at what they do. Like, we don't need 1 million followers. And I think we're going to see this. Like, I know a lot of people in this entrepreneurial world are talking about it. Like, influencers will be exposed because they have millions of followers, but they're broke because they haven't figured out how to monetize. So follower does not equal $sign. And I think we're really going to see that. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Nate. At the end of the day, our lives are sculpted by the actions that we take. That's what sculpts our reality. And the actions derive from the decisions that we make. Not every decision is going to be like, yeah, I feel like doing this. But when we have clarity around what we actually want to create, in high performance, clarity is the cornerstone habit. When you have clarity, everything rises. But when you don't, everything kind of falls back a bit, right? When we have the clarity of what we want, all of a sudden, what it will take to get there becomes very, very clear. And when you're very tapped into why you want that thing, right? When the why is strong enough, the how will become apparent. It's just true. Tony Robbins always talks about this. When we have strong enough reasons, we'll be able to create whatever it is that we want to create.
Yeah.
And we're not always going to feel like it, but that's why we always need to build this toolkit of what's going to be, what do we need to deploy right now? Maybe it's Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. I freaking love what Mel Robbins is about. And that's such a cool tool, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And then we just make whatever decision it is that we want to do. Or maybe we're going to leverage some breath scaling. We want to generate some energy and realize, okay, maybe I don't need to rely on Starbucks. Full disclaimer, love Starbucks, love coffee, but we don't always want to depend on it. So maybe we do some breath scaling, and that's what gets us in that state that we want to go and, do whatever it is. Maybe it's make the sales call. Maybe it's jump on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever it is that we know we need to do. That's what fear hacking really is. It's just another practice that I help my clients walk through to do exactly what we know we need to do. And we just do it at a much higher rate so we can collapse the window to create whatever it is we want to create. But we got to have those those tools in our kit. And at the end of the day, whether it's what we're doing or what someone else is doing, as long as you have those tools, man, you're going to be off to the races.
And this is something I always remind people, like, go, hey, why would I want to coach? Whether it's a personal trainer, a life coach, a business coach, and all this stuff, is because, like, even if you know what to do, like, I know what to do when I go to the gym, but I also don't feel like it a lot of times. And I need some accountability, and I need somebody to kind of look at the things that I'm doing and say, you're not doing enough of this or not of that. And I think a business coach or a life coach, they identify those things. Like, even if you say, hey, I got this figured out, you might be spending time on things that don't matter, that don't move the needle. But like that idea of, like, you're busy, but you're not doing anything you're not moving, like you're running in place. And the coach helps you identify and say, hey, I know you think you're working hard because you're doing logos and you're making your website all pretty, but go get some sales, go out there, make some calls. So that's what really matters. Nobody really gives that much two shits about your website, I mean, they do, but at the same time, like, if they know who you are personally and you're reaching out and calling it, they'll understand, like, hey, it's coming, and it will. So very cool.
Exactly.
So where can people find you, Mike? What's your website?
Yeah, the best place is the podcast, probably. I mean, I just run a show called the Results Engine Podcast. If anything that we've talked about is even remotely interesting, you're probably going to want to check that out. Everything from interviewing top performers. We do 2 interviews a week. And then on Fridays, we have a solo episode that's like the nitty gritty tactical, like, this is what you can deploy right now to get XYZ result type of stuff. Super consumable and concise stuff. So that's the best spot if you want to get a better feel for what we're about. And then I'm just at Mike Szczesniak on all Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So feel free to slide in the DMs with any questions.
Yeah, and I'll post all those places on the show notes, and definitely check out Mike's podcast. He's got some serious guests on there, some great names. He's got a lot of cool content and the wealth of information. I think you're gonna all enjoy it. So, Mike, thanks so much. I know you're a busy person. You got probably a million other shows to get on and complete this world tour. We like to call it world domination. You're out on a mission. So very cool. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
No, thanks so much for having me, man. This was fun.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.